The New York Giants upset the Seattle Seahawks 29-20. What a game, folks. We're going to break it all down for you coming up next on the Locked On Giants podcast.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This episode of the Locked On Giants podcast is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Hello, New York Giant fans, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast family, your team every day. I'm your host, Patricia Traina, credentialed member of the New York Giants media for Locked On, as well as for New York Giants on SI, which is where you can find my written work. And as always, welcome on into my Blue Crew community members, to my everydayers, to my newcomers, and everybody in between. Thank you for spending part of your day with us here on the Locked On Giants podcast. It is appreciated. And you know what else is appreciated? We've got a win to talk about. And oh my gosh, folks, what a win by the New York Giants. I can't remember the last time they had a win just like this. And I'm including the week 3 win against the Cleveland Browns, which was impressive, but not like this, ladies and gentlemen. The New York Giants getting a 29-20 win in dramatic fashion over the Seattle Seahawks. And on today's show, we're going to break it down: offense, defense, special teams. We're going to talk about stats. We're going to talk about individual performances. We're going to have takeaways. Oh my gosh, so much to talk about, ladies and gentlemen. And we're going to talk about all of that on today's show. So let's get it started. Oh, I'm so excited. I tell you, I'm rejuvenated right now. All right, let's start off with the New York Giants offense. Now, coming into this game, everybody was like, oh boy, no Malik Nabers. Might not have Devin Singletary. Those two guys account for more than 50% of the Giants' total offensive yards. What are they going to do? Where are they going to find the yards? How are they going to, muster this up against a good Seattle defense? Folks, Brian Daboll, the offensive play caller, found a way. He found a way. And let me tell you what he did. The Giants, amongst other things, they didn't spread the ball around as much as they had in the past. I think they only threw to 5 guys, 2 receivers, Robinson and Slayton, tight end Theo Johnson, who, by the way, it was nice to see the tight ends get more involved in the passing game. I think he had, I want to say 5 targets, caught 3 of them. And then the rest went to the running backs, the 2 running backs, Eric Gray and Tyrone Tracy. Daniel Jones had himself a day, ladies and gentlemen. According to Next Gen Stats, Daniel Jones ran play action 35.9% of his dropbacks. And on those dropbacks, he went 9 of 12, 101 yards, and 2 touchdowns. That was the first time in his career that he had multiple touchdowns thrown on play action. Kind of hard to believe. And again, that's per Next Gen Stats. Just play action, when the run game is working as it did for the Giants, play action is generally going to work. And, another thing that the Giants did to kind of fix the offense, if you will, they ran a lot less heavy personnel, and heavy personnel defined as 12 or 13. And for those of you who aren't familiar with what the numbers stand for, the first number stands for the number of running backs, and the second number, the number of tight ends. So if you have 12, that's 1 running back, 2 tight ends. If you have 13, 1 running back, 3 tight ends. 11 would be 1 running back, 1 tight end, 3 receivers. Okay, so that's what those numbers mean. So anyway, you look at the personnel. The Giants only ran heavy personnel on 5 times for 12. So 12 personnel, they ran it 5 times. and they ran 13 personnel 6 times, primarily down by the goal line is where they ran it, and on those short yardage situations, as opposed to running it constantly. And by contrast, I went and I looked up what they did against Dallas, because I recall them running heavy personnel a little bit more often, especially in those last in the first 4 games. And against Dallas, they ran 12 personnel 19 times, 13 personnel 3 times. And the Giants on offense really went after the Seattle Seahawks edges. That's where they picked up most of their yardage. I don't have an official count for you just yet, but just kind of unofficially, if you look at some of the bigger plays, a lot of them came around the edges as opposed to up the gut. And when they softened up the edges and the Seahawks would funnel resources out to them, that's when they would hit the tight end over the middle, or maybe hit one of the running backs coming out of the backfield. So it was pretty neat the way they went after the Seattle defense. The offensive line, solid, ladies and gentlemen, not just in terms of protection, but in that loud environment. And Lumen Field is loud. I have been there a couple times. It is loud. Okay. The Giants did not have a single false start on offense. Pretty good. So whatever Brian Dable did to get them ready, and I'm sure he used crowd noise. I also think on the broadcast they said something to the effect that Dable would jump into the huddle and he would start screaming while the play was being called out, just to kind of, get the noise even closer to the players. But whatever he did, it worked. Not a single false start, which is pretty impressive. I think the only penalty they had on offense was against Darius Slayton for 15 yards, a personal foul, when Slayton went to signal that he had recorded a first down. He did so instead of with an open hand. He kind of just made what looked like a gun motion with his hand. And the officials are going to call that every time. I mean, Malik Nabers got nailed for that a couple weeks ago, or last week, I should say, against Dallas. So you just can't do that. You just can't make any kind of, gun related or anything that suggests violence. They're going to call that. Keeping with the offense, I mentioned getting the tight end more involved. Tyrone Tracy, let's talk about him. 129 yards, 18 carries. Average 5.1 yards on 31 carries for the Giants run game did. Daniel Jones got a little bit more involved in the run game this week. I think he had 11 carries, and he went over 2,000 career rushing yards, which is pretty wild considering if you think back to when Eli Manning was here, Eli Manning barely ran. But they got Daniel Jones more involved, really took advantage of beating up that defensive front that was so banged up for the Seattle Seahawks. So the Giants went after them, which was pretty neat. Daniel Jones, I mentioned 11 runs, 38 yards, and Seattle basically had to account for him as a weapon now. So now instead of, loading up the box, whatever, they had to maybe assign a spy, which took a guy out of coverage, opened things up for the Giants deep down the field. Darius Slayton, I mentioned 8 catches out of 11 pass targets, 122 yards, had a touchdown, and he was plus 58 over his expected yardage total, according to NFL Next Gen Stats. He accounted for 73% of the Giants' air yards this week, which was the second highest by a receiver this season, behind Malik Nabers. So the Giants' offense firing on all cylinders. I mean, you didn't see very many mistakes. The only real mistake you saw came in the very beginning of the game when they had the first play, I think, was a sack and a fumble that was recorded or recovered, I should say, by Andrew Thomas of the Giants. And then when they got down to the, I think it was the 1 yard line on the second scoring drive, or the second drive that they had, that was when Eric Gray lost the handle on the ball, and the Seahawks recovered it and brought it back 102 yards for its score. Other than that, and look, the running backs, for what it's worth, if you're looking for one little negative, one little nitpick, the running backs better get it together because they're losing balls, it seems, every week. And you just can't have that. But overall, the offense, if you have to give it a grade, you give it a solid A, in my opinion. It was as close to as solid of a game that you're going to see on first glance. That's my assessment of it. And hey, how about we have some more of that next week and the week after that and the week after that? Wouldn't that be cool? All right, coming up next, we're going to talk about the defense. Don't go anywhere. Hey, Giant fans, when you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just a job board. They help you hire professionals that you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job, but who might be open to the perfect role. 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours when they use LinkedIn. And did you know that LinkedIn is constantly finding ways to make the process easier? They've launched a new feature that helps you write job descriptions, making the process so much easier. Find out why 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring by posting your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonNFL. That's linkedin.com/lockedonNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. This episode of the Locked On Giants podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp. Halloween lets us have fun with what scares us. But what about those fears that don't involve zombies and ghosts? Because sometimes the scariest thing is not facing our fears in the first place and holding ourselves back. That's where therapy can help. And if you're thinking about starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be flexible and suited to your schedule. Fill out a questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist. And if you find your assigned therapist isn't a match, switch at any time for no additional charge. Don't skip therapy day. Visit betterhelp.com/lockedon to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon for 10% off your first month. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Locked On Giants podcast. I'm your host, Patricia Traina, and we are talking a Giants win. Yes, I'll tell you, I got to share something with you folks. When I did my prediction piece for New York Giants on SI, I said I was going to not pick the Giants anymore. And I have true story. I think with the exception of maybe 1 week, the Giants actually, no, I take that back. I don't think I've gotten it right yet. So when I pick the Giants to lose, they win. When I pick them to win, they lose. So maybe I should just take one for the team and just pick them to lose the rest of the season, right? Look, hey, if I have to take one for the team, I will. But don't tell anybody, all right? That's our secret. Okay, let's talk about the defense. The defense, oh my goodness, had themselves a game. We've got to start with Deonte Banks, all right? Now, this past week, Jerome Henderson, the defensive backs coach, basically kind of broke the mold a little bit in that he came right out and he was very critical of Deonte Banks and the play against the Dallas Cowboys when he allowed a 55-yard touchdown catch by CeeDee Lamb. And he was blunt about it. He said, I didn't like it. There was nothing about it I liked. He talked about, delivering a message, we'll see if we're going to have Banks travel with the number one receiver. He basically called out Deonte Banks, and rightfully so. And that's not something you really see very often from this coaching staff or any coaching staff. A lot of times, they kind of bite their tongue and they don't say a whole lot. But this needed to be said, and Henderson was honest. And you know what? Banks was either going to sit and sulk about it because he got called out in public, or he was going to do something about it. And what did he do, ladies and gentlemen? He did something about it. He went up against DK Metcalf, who is probably, I guess you can make the case that he's the number one receiver for the Seahawks. So he covered Metcalf, traveled with Metcalf on 35 of 47 of Metcalf's routes, held Metcalf to 2 catches on 4 targets for 24 yards. Not bad, I'd say. Wouldn't you? Deontay Banks, comeback player of the week for the Giants after last week's or the previous week's horrible game against Dallas. All right, let's talk about the pass rush. All right, remember we were all saying, when the heck is the pass rush going to get in gear? 7 sacks this week against the Seattle Seahawks banged up offensive line. All right, Dexter Lawrence with 3, DJ Davidson with 2, and then the rest was scattered amongst I think Kayvon Thibodeau had a half. I think Brian Burns got involved in one. The Giants now lead the NFL with 22 sacks. And that, according to ESPN, is the third most sacks through 5 games over the last 15 seasons. Pretty good. And the beauty part of it is that the Giants didn't have to blitz like crazy. They mixed it up. A lot of times they were able to get home with just a front. Sometimes they threw in a blitz. Shane Bowen kind of found a happy medium as far as whether to blitz versus whether to, just send the bare minimum. And it worked. It worked beautifully. For what it's worth, the Giants right now, or at least once all the numbers reset, 5th highest blitz rate. They're blitzing at 31.7%. They did blitz a little bit more this week. I don't have the exact numbers, but I do know that Geno Smith was blitzed quite a bit in the first half of the game. I don't have the exact numbers. I have to go back and look at the film and kind of just add everything up. But Geno Smith in the first half, 9 of 14, 97 yards. Not very effective as the Giants just dominated the clock with 3 drives that had at least double digit, I think at least 11 plays per possession. So that was pretty good. The coverage, like I said, not too bad. The Seahawks really didn't burn them deep. There was some tight coverage. I didn't see a whole lot in the way of blown coverages just on a first glance. But really, a solid effort by the Giants defense. And you could just see as they were coming along, they were getting better and better and better. The confidence was growing. Now, in the next segment, I'm going to talk about special teams. But before I do, I just want to mention something real quick. Isaiah Simmons, who turned out to be one of the heroes or perhaps the hero of this game, and we'll talk about it next segment, didn't play, or at least I didn't see him play any snaps on defense. The Giants at inside linebacker basically going with Bobby Okereke, Micah McFadden, and Darius Muaso. So that's kind of relegated Isaiah Simmons more to special teams. But you know what? Isaiah Simmons, who, I know was disappointed that he's not out there on defense, especially he thinks he had a pretty good training camp. Whether you agree, that remains to be seen. But Simmons is disappointed with that. But as I said with Banks, when you're disappointed, you do one of 2 things. You either come out swinging with your opportunities or you cry and sit in the corner. Simmons came out swinging. And we're going to talk about that play that he made that basically avoided the Giants going into overtime and basically sealed the deal for the Giants. We're going to talk about that right after this. Hey, Giant fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more, all on the very same page where you place your bets. And right now, you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to download America's #1 sportsbook. Hey, Giant fans, the new Locked On NFL is here. Locked On NFL is now 2 shows every day. First, the Madman, Tyler Rowland, kicks off your morning with a double shot of NFL espresso. Then stop by the barbershop for a visit with Tony Wiggins for some real NFL talk. Add in the Locked On local experts, and you'll get unprecedented NFL insight Hot opinions, detailed breakdowns, all in 30 minutes. It's the new Locked On NFL, and it's twice a day. Make the new Locked On NFL your second listen on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Locked On Giants podcast. I'm your host, Patricia Traina, and the Giants win 29-20. Well, that's good. I mean, the Mets lost, unfortunately, to the Phillies, but the Giants won. And I am so excited. I just love talking about a Giants win on the podcast as soon as the game is over. It just beats talking about a loss. There's only so many ways you can talk about a loss. And I get tired of it after a while. So I am so thrilled to be talking about a win. So let's talk about special teams and the play of the game, in my opinion. Isaiah Simmons blocking the 47-yard field goal attempt by Jason Myers that, had he made it, would have tied the game, probably sent it into overtime, and then who knows what would have happened. Probably would have shifted the whole momentum, as a matter of fact, which up until that point, I guess the Giants had. So what happened? Michael Gabriel, the special teams coordinator, saw something on film with how the Seahawks offensive line on field goal and place kicking snaps lines up. And what he saw, what you want to pay attention to with those lines is how they space the guys out. Sometimes they'll like have two guys closer together and then have a big gap between another one. Sometimes they'll be even. Sometimes they'll be tight. There's different spacing for different scenarios and different opponents. And Gabriel, Brian Dable didn't actually come right out and say this other than to give Gabriel credit for seeing something on film, but he apparently saw that there was a gap that was big enough to exploit. And they tried Dexter Lawrence and Isaiah Simmons in practice last week to see if they couldn't jump that gap. All right. So they simulated the gap that they saw on film, and they had Lawrence and Isaiah Simmons practice jumping that gap. Now, you've got to be careful when you do that, because if you jump over a guy or if you make contact before the ball is placed, you're going to get a penalty. So it was a very high risk, high reward type of play. Simmons burst through. He was chosen to be the guy to break through the gap, got through, got a hand on the ball, knocked it down. Bryce Ford Wheaton was in the neighborhood, scooped it up, boom, off to the races, 60 yards for the touchdown. The Giants, instead of going for the extra point, I guess you could say they tried. They went for this 2-point conversion, but they took a knee so as to keep burning time off the clock, rather than give the Seahawks a chance to come back with whatever seconds were left. So that play was you can. I mean, there were a lot of great plays in this game, but that play clinched the win for the Giants. Because if they get penalized on that one, it's all over. Seattle gets a first down. Chances are they get into the end zone, game over. So kudos to Isaiah Simmons, who, as I mentioned before, not happy that he's been reduced on defense, but instead of sulking about it, he came out and he brought the goods on special teams, made a big, big play for his team that helped them win the game. One other guy I want to mention, actually, I want to mention two other guys. Greg Joseph continues to kick well after that first shaky start that he had. So Greg Joseph making all of his place kicks. But let's also give credit to Jamie Gillen, who had a 46.5 average, 44.8 net. There was one ball in particular that Gillen hit that was just a booming kick. And it took a favorable Giants bounce. That's the one that Dane Belton downed, I think, at the 5-yard line of the Seahawks. It was just so perfectly placed, and it died literally like within that 5-yard range. And Belton was able to down it, forced the Seahawks to have to go pretty much the length of the field. So the Giants getting some really good special teams play. I'm still not crazy about, the punt return situation. Smith Marset had at least one punt return where he didn't, initially he bobbled it a little bit before securing it. So I keep hoping any day now that Gunnar Olszewski, was healthy enough to come back and take over that role because he was a little bit better with the ball security. But otherwise, special teams, they did their part. Overall, offense, defense, special teams, put it all together. The coaching was solid. Not a whole lot to sit here and nitpick about or say that you didn't like. Then again, no team ever plays a perfect game, but the Giants, this is a big win for them because the Seahawks are a very good team. And you know what? Let's hope now that the Giants take this momentum and continue to build on it. Because unlike the win against Cleveland, you can make the case that, Cleveland had a very good defense, but a meh type of offense. Can't make that case really with Seattle. Seattle's solid in all three phases of the ball. This was a really, really good win for the Giants. Should quell a lot of the grumbling that's been going on. And especially, and I'm guilty of this, so I include myself in this, but can we all stop talking about trading Darius Slayton? Guy has a messed up thumb, and for him to have the performance he had, kudos to him. So that's going to do it for us tonight, Giant fans. Thank you, as always, for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed the podcast. And more importantly, I hope you enjoyed the win because it was special. I will see you tomorrow, Giant fans, with an all-new episode of Locked On Giants. Have a good night.